Hello and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about pop culture and the world around it. I'm Alistair.
I'm Nick.
And in today's episode, we have two reviews for you. First, we'll be talking about the ending of The Good Place, as it happened during our break, and we couldn't let it pass without comment. And then we'll be discussing a new Spanish sci-fi thriller on Netflix called The Platform. But before all of that, Nick, do you have anything to recommend to our listeners?
Yep, in the last fortnight, I went back to a previous recommendation and finally finished the whole thing off. Not talking about The Good Place this time, but instead Curse Words, the comic from Image by Charles Soule and Ryan Brown, about a wizard who comes from a hellish magical fantasy world to our world and decides he actually wants to stay there and set up a nice business where he can be free and live off capitalism. And yeah, I read all 25 issues plus a couple of specials, which I think are now out in both single issues and collections. I read them, as I often do, because they were all in a Comixology sale about a month and a half ago, so I piled them all up and finally went through them in a big block. And yeah, it's really good fun. It keeps up the sort of wackiness of it. Like, one of the best jokes in the early issues involves a fish being tipped into hot water and complaining about it, and one of the better jokes in the rest of the series involves the Eiffel Tower coming to life and having an extended romance with an also alive Statue of Liberty. It's quite silly. The series always keeps this slightly, I don't know, maybe Asterix-y brand of quite silly, quite wacky comedy, which always somewhat offsets any of the serious moments. But it does mean that it never stays still for very long. It never doesn't just pile on to the next silly thing. And the art by Ryan Brown is very, very lush and likeable and cartoony. There's lots of background jokes. There's lots of density of things happening. The sidekick character of Margaret, who was introduced in the first episode, both the first issues and the first storyline, as a koala, does indeed turn out to be one of the main sort of sympathetic human key linchpin characters of the series and develops in a lot of interesting ways. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. If you are up for some sort of somewhat light and superficial, but very, well done, fun and funny sort of action fantasy, then Curse Words. It's finished now. Check it out.
Yeah, I remember the koala being a breakout character. So how long did it run for, the entire thing? Was it sort of standard kind of comic length?
It wasn't quite the sort of 50, 60 issues some of them go for. It was 25 issues in the end, which ran over, I think, a bit over 2 years, because they usually take a month or so off between storylines. So yeah, about between 2.5 and 3 years it ran for.
I remember the art being really, really good as well, like especially the way the magic was drawn and things like that. I remember enjoying that, definitely.
Yeah, as someone who tries to put together comics himself occasionally, yeah, there's definitely an air of, okay, you've definitely seen the sort of wacky, surreal magic, things turning into other things, inanimate objects coming to life and having personalities, sort of big, broad, sort of surreal creatures smashing into each other. You've really seen what that artist can do and built this whole world to his strengths. It's a book with a very clear sort of visual identity.
Yeah, the Eiffel Tower coming to life. Sounds like that could be quite fun. Yeah, it kind of reminds me a lot of what I think Disney and Pixar are actually very good at, which is like giving personality to like animals and like inanimate objects. I was just thinking the original animated like Beauty and the Beast. It is actually incredible how much personality they can give like a teapot or a candlestick, and it's not an easy thing to do, or to like get people to sympathize with like a bear or a lion or something like that, because like it's kind of, there is something in like kind of anthropomorphizing other things and making them like accessible and so characters you would engage with. That is quite a skill.
Yeah, it's not actually quite as easy as just shoving a pair of eyes on them and making some external bit of them move around a bit. It's actually quite hard, but yeah, Ryan Brown is very good at it here. Yeah, it still keeps a good amount of the sort of moral ambiguity that was promised in the first volume going. Like, there's always a hint that Wizard is actually a bit of a dick. And, he makes a lot of somewhat dickish moves. In the first issue we read, which I think it was the first issue, he basically imprisons the entire audience of a basketball game or baseball game because they saw him smash up a villain. And he doesn't want people to realise quite how brutal he's able to be. And yeah, there's this sort of ongoing thing of him, continuing to be a bit of a dick and continuing to maybe learn he shouldn't be. And obviously it gets a bit more into the mythology of the world, the whole world. It's called, without a W, which is a pun that gets revisited a lot, where Wizard comes from and where it actually came from and what it actually is, and the hierarchy of it and all does get explored.
Oh, cool. That does sound good, actually. Yeah, that was some of the interesting bits. I remember what we read. The one that we read, the bit we first kind of covered in the podcast, sort of went up to the introduction of the whole world. Yeah, the opening bit with like when it introduces Wizard on Earth and his sort of life as a kind of he's achieved some level of fame and celebrity as like a wizard, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's a sort of wizard for hire. He does magic in exchange for sapphires, which are, it turns out, the source of his power.
Yeah, but no, and also I do remember him imprisoning the stadium full of people, and that being a moment of when you're like, maybe he's not like the sort of a pure good guy. They sort of add some sort of shades of grey to the scene.
I do occasionally wonder if they finished up a bit early, because it sometimes feels like they rushed through some of the endings a bit. But yeah, it's a good comic. If you're interested in that sort of comedy-tinged fantasy action, then the whole thing is now available in various forms. I'd recommend giving it a stab.
Cool.
Okay, Alistair, what else have you been up to?
Well, yeah, depending on how long the world remains in a sort of a state of paralysis and we continue to be locked down, this segment may become the regular lockdown culture update. What have we been doing to ease the boredom and tension during this time of not being able to go outdoors? And so far, I've taken on 2 watching projects during the lockdown. They're quite different. I'll let you find out for yourself what the difference between the 2 is. The first thing I've been doing is I've been going back and rewatching all of the Tom Cruise Mission Impossible films. Because they're all up on Now TV. I think randomly, apart from the third one, is not there. But yeah, they're all on Now TV. So I've been going through and rewatching. Yeah, a franchise that spans from it began in the mid '90s, and the most recent one came out in 2018. Yeah, it's a reasonable spread of time. I think when I did a short bit on the most recent one, which we talked about briefly in the podcast, Mission Impossible Fallout, I described this as the little franchise that could. I mean, it's a little franchise in that it's compared to, I don't know, like Star Wars or Marvel, but it is a franchise built around still the most famous and most recognizable film star in the world, Tom Cruise. So I don't know actually how much of a little franchise it is. But rewatching them, they are like a really good series of films, really good series of action films. The hit to turkey rate for Mission Impossible is, for example, much better than with Bond. I know there's a lot more Bond films, but there are like a lot of stinkers. And there isn't a Mission Impossible one that's particularly bad. And each one kind of is very much of its time in a slightly interesting way. The first one, which was like made in the mid-90s, there's some brilliant early internet stuff, such as when Tom Cruise's character sends an email and there's a little animation of like the email going into an envelope and being stamped and then going through like a letterbox, and thinking, man, that'd be torturous if you had to see that animation every time you send an email today. And there's a significant bit of plot in the first film that revolves around Usenet groups. People remember those from the 90s, so it's very 90s.
Part of me's impressed they put that level of actual accurate detail in.
Yeah, there is a bit when that's how they secretly communicate, with the spies on these Usenet Bible groups. I completely forgot about that, yeah. But yeah, the first one actually, it is a really good, like quite tense spy thriller. It's got Jean Reno and Ving Rhames in it. They're pretty good. The second one is quite interesting. It's sort of big, dumb fun. It was when John Woo, the sort of Hong Kong action director, sort of soprano, came to Hollywood and started doing Hollywood action films. And the second one, it is like really over the top and constantly loud music throughout the whole thing, and these like crazy over the top action scenes with slow motion and like doves flying through and things. So the second one is just like really, really over the top in that sort of early aughts kind of way. The third one is I'm not going to do them all. I'm just going to do a quick roundup of the ones I've rewatched so far. The third one actually I found is surprisingly underrated gem. It's got Philip Seymour Hoffman as the villain, and he's excellent. And it's got some quite clever, I don't know, subversions of expectations or sort of subversion of tropes, such as the main heist sequence happens off screen in the third one, and there's little bits like, and it's more character based. It seems to be a lot more based around Tom Cruise's character desire to get out of the crazy impossible missions task force and live a normal life, but kind of gets dragged back into it. Yeah, it's an underrated gem, I think, the third one. The fourth one I rewatched last night, and that one is also very good. It has the excellent action scene when Tom Cruise hangs off the side of the Burj Khalifa.
Did at some point they seem to have some sort of revamp or slight retooling to become sillier?
Yeah.
Was it about the third one where they went from being surprisingly convoluted and complex spy films into slightly more straightforward, oh look, he's doing a stupid action sequence spy films?
I think it was around the fourth one that they kind of did that. Yeah, well, they kind of introduced Simon Pegg first appears in the third one, but they make him a kind of a core part of the Impossible Mission Squad. And yeah, there's like the fourth one is definitely getting more into, I guess, the modern mode of filmmaking. There's lots of, I guess, Joss Whedon-esque bantery jokes or people commenting on the absurdity of it in a sort of slightly self-aware way.
That to be fair, is quite Joss Whedon.
Yeah, but generally, actually, one of the strengths of it is a franchise that takes the action and itself quite seriously, but not in like a really like Po-Face or Batman way. But there is a sense of like, in the fourth one, the villain is this sort of Swedish nuclear extremist who's stolen a Russian computer and is going to start a nuclear war. And they sell the tension and they sell the premise, and it is believable. And although there is some humor, and obviously this is a popcorn action film, it's not supposed to be like, meditation on like war or something like that. But it's got that level of seriousness. It's not constantly subverting it with humour, which makes you kind of, I don't know, buy into it a bit more. I mean, as much as I enjoy the Joss Whedon banter, that degree of seriousness I think really works with these films. I guess maybe it's different, like if it's like Captain America and Iron Man, it's just that little bit less believable, so you need that humour to kind of make it make sense.
Well, it helps differentiate it from Bond, I suppose, which is always, obviously also very silly.
Yeah, I mean, obviously some of it is just sort of silly action movie stuff, like we're rewatching the fourth one. There's a bit when they're like, okay, we just need to hack into the server room, but that can only be done externally. Oh, and it's on the 120th floor of the Burj Khalifa, and you have to climb up the outside. And there's this moment when Tom Cruise is like, seriously? And they're like, yep, you're going to be climbing up the outside of the building. And obviously there's a bit like, well, this is just ridiculous. It's there just to create tension, but it is good tension. And if anything, the second one is the one that's least serious, which is just totally over the top. Motorcycles flying through the air, again, like slow motion gunfights, doves flying in for like no reason. That's like a weird signature that John Woo had.
Doves. Okay.
Every John Woo film has a bit when like a dove flies through in slow motion for some reason. Like it's in like all of them. Or at least it's certainly in all of the early ones. It's definitely in Face Off, Mission Impossible 2 and in Wind Talkers. I think I stopped watching John Woo films at that point. But yeah, he always does seem to have. I'm sure there's one in Hard Boiled as well. It is like a weird thing. There's always like a dove flying through in slow motion at some point.
How very Bono.
Yeah, it's a bit strange. Anyway, I'll keep you updated as it goes on. I mean, I know it's kind of weird. I feel like a real kinship with this action franchise. I don't really know why. Maybe it's because
Me neither.
The first one was something I saw when I was quite young. I must have gone to cinema and seen it when I was about 10, and it made a big impression on me then, and I'm kind of stuck with the franchise since. Although I do think, overall, they are pretty good, and other than the second one that's a bit silly, they are a pretty good success rate, which is a better success rate than like Bond or other action franchise, like Die Hard, for example, where they just kind of tail off to be terrible after the third one.
Yeah, I mean, my spy franchise, the one I actually liked and made a vague effort to follow, was Probably Born. But even that has seemed pretty inessential since about the third one.
Yeah, I did like the fourth one. Again, Jeremy Renner, who's also in Mission Impossible 4 and 5. That was a good film. I think the fifth one, when they brought back Matt Damon, was supposed to be awful, and I didn't watch it.
Yeah, I stayed with that as far as checking what the reviews were, but they were so bad I decided not to.
Yeah, Bourne's like another one, I think, that like takes the action sort of seriously and has maybe less of the humour, but more kind of trying to sell this as like a serious sort of spy film that you could believe, is actually happening. So, yeah, maybe similar sort of thing, with obviously some over-the-top stunts and chases.
What was your other lockdown viewing project?
My other lockdown viewing project is that I am watching the entire Ken Burns Vietnam War documentary, the PBS one. It's all on Netflix, all about 20 hours of it. And it is, the Vietnam War as it happened in excruciating detail. I'm not going to say too much about it other than if you're interested in military history or Vietnam or the culture of the 60s and America and the political history, it's fascinating. It's got loads of detail. It's 10 episodes. Each one's about 2 hours long. So each one's like almost like a film in its own right. But it is a brilliant, epic historical documentary. And it's all on Netflix. So if you're stuck inside like me, limited only to an hour a day outside, I think there's worse things you could do than either dive into Ken Burns Vietnam or rewatch all of Mission Impossible, which actually is overall very fun.
I mean, I've been watching the 90s X-Men cartoon on Disney Plus, as I believe we discussed last week. I'm still doing that, so that's probably less worthy than Ken Burns documentaries.
Yeah, but still fun. Yeah, that's a good lockdown project as well.
Yeah, Apocalypse has just shown up, and the 90s Saturday morning cartoon of Apocalypse is definitely what I wanted, a cartoon supervillain.
Better than the Oscar Isaacs.
I mean, a lot of things are, but yes, he in particular is much better.
So it holds up after all these years. It's not just one of those like ruin your childhood sort of thing.
Mostly, yeah. I think the dialogue is a bit. I suspect I'm watching this for a certain amount of irony, but it is still quite fun. The episodes are surprisingly interconnected and continuity heavy for a kids' cartoon from the 90s.
Yeah, I mean, I remember. I think when it must have been sort of 15 odd years ago, there was a big wave of when DVDs like were really, really popular, re-releasing almost every 90s animated cartoon show on DVD. And I remember reviewing Empire of the Thundercats show, and it basically said like, do not buy this, it will ruin your childhood. This show was actually terrible, like all the characters are really annoying, just don't buy it and preserve the beautiful way it was in your head when it was actually fun. Don't ruin it. And I'm glad that the X-Men cartoon is not like that.
I too once got sucked into the nostalgic trap of rewatching a couple of episodes of Thundercats before concluding that no, this show is actually tedious, noisy, incoherent gibberish. But no, the X-Men is better than that. Yeah, it's better than that. Okay, and our first headline review in today's episode, we will be talking about the final season of The Good Place. This, of course, is the afterlife comedy from NBC and Netflix. NBC in America, Netflix in Britain, as ever. Starring Kristen Bell, William Jackson Harper, Jamila Jamil, and Manny Jacinto as 4 humans who find themselves in the afterlife and end up at the centre of a bit of an existential crisis for the afterlife as they try to work out whether the system of evaluating people based on their good deeds and bad deeds is actually just kind of stupid. That's certainly the impetus for a lot of Season 4 and the latter half of Season 3, and I think we'll be mostly talking about Season 4 in this segment. And for the record, since it's been 2 months since this aired, we're going to give ourselves the gift of spoilers. If you are concerned with spoilers for the final season of The Good Place, I suggest not listening to this segment, as I imagine we'll be getting into them fairly quickly. On that note, Alistair, what did you think of the final season?
So my review in one sentence is that the show went out on a high, which I am very pleased about. I'm torn to say, did it finish exactly at the right time or maybe slightly before it should have finished? I mean, they could conceivably have done another series, but I would have definitely felt there'd have been a sense of diminishing returns. I liked the ending, and I'm glad it ended where it did, and it didn't become one of those shows that basically go like, they should have wound this up a couple of seasons ago. I mean, the best bits might have been a bit earlier, like series 1 and 2, but it was still very, very good in the 4th series. And the ending kind of worked really well. It wrapped everything up. Each character got a really nice send-off. They resolved the meta storyline about, as you say, this crisis in the afterlife about whether their system of eternal judgment is fair. So I thought it was good that it wraps it up well in a satisfactory way and in a timely manner. So it's something a lot of shows that kind of linger around for a season more than they really should could learn from.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy it ended where it did, because I felt like it was starting to get a bit sweaty with its constant twists in Season 3. Especially. I was pretty happy when I heard they were ending it with Season 4, and the final season, I think, started off okay and finished really, really good. Basically, the series has 14 episodes in it, if you count the double-length finale as basically 2 episodes. And yeah, I'd say the first half of those episodes are alright. This is the stuff where they're basically Good Place, as you probably know if you've bothered to listen to this, is predicated on this afterlife where people have to gain points to see if they deserve to go to heaven. And in the first half of Season 4, they run an experiment on a bunch of humans to see if they're able to improve in the afterlife rather than just being consigned to heaven or hell forever based on how they were when they died. So the first half of the season is about this experiment in which the 4 main characters are trying to make these humans improve to prove that moral progression is possible, and the forces of hell are kind of trying to ruin it. And that kind of ends in the middle, and then the second half they go into this weird series of massive celestial encounters trying to work out what the nature of the afterlife will be and then moving forward into it. That stuff's really, really good. The first half of the series with the experiment is alright, but does feel a lot like stuff The Good Place has done before. So considering that I felt they'd already started to repeat themselves a bit, I'm okay that they finished where they did.
Yeah, I agree with that. There were some bits in the early part of the series 4 that I did really like. Like, they introduced the character of Brett, was quite funny. I mean, obviously, it was definitely a crowd-pleasing character, sort of definition of a privileged white man, somewhat getting his comeuppance in the afterlife. But I thought there was some very well-observed humour about that character. So there's a few things he introduced like that worked very well, I thought.
It was fun. I mean, it's weird. The third season took them almost entirely out of what we've become used to as the setting for The Good Place. They were on Earth. They were in different sections of the outskirts of The Good Place. They were in the bad place for a bit. This season, I guess, as a sort of final victory lap before finishing, took us back to something pretty much resembling the setup from the first 1 and a bit seasons. But yeah, first 1.5 seasons, I think. And yeah, because this show has always made such a big deal out of moving forward and progressing and, destroying the status quo before we can get bored of it, which it's usually done quite a good job of. In fact, to be honest, there were some points in Season 3 where I think it was so keen to be seen to be doing that, but it actually ended some storylines a bit earlier than it needed to. That spending like 7 episodes in Season 4 wallowing in this sort of rehash of Season 1 felt a bit... Alright. I mean, this isn't unentertaining. I like these characters. I'm happy to be spending time with them. It is indeed, as Alistair said, funny to watch that wanker be a wanker and then get judged by the other characters for being a wanker and continuing to be a wanker. But yeah, I was happier when they went into the weird format breaking stuff towards the end.
And it was, they did work well sort of resolving the overall sort of arc plot that kind of began with the beginning, which is this idea of like, is it right to judge people eternally based on this point system? Which is, and I do like a good show that kind of interrogates its premise at the end and kind of ends with the sort of the breakdown of the idea itself, almost from the beginning, from like the first scene. You introduce the idea that you're given points based on your life on Earth, and then that decides what your lot in the afterlife is. And it ends with them basically saying that's not fair because, as you say, it doesn't give people the chance to move on, or to learn or to grow, so we should change the system. And then the whole arc of the show is them going from this kind of equilibrium of this is what the old system was like to the equilibrium of this is what the new system is like. And the last episode especially, there's very little tension really in the last episode. It's pretty much just, the new system's in place and it's working great. They throw in a little bit of tension towards the end in the second last episode when they finally get to the good place, and the whole thing's resolved by about the 11th or 12th episode of series 4. And then they throw in some additional tension when they finally get to the good place and find out there's problems there, which were resolved quite quickly in a single sort of 20-minute episode, which was quite fast. But then again, I much prefer that than the alternative of them doing another half season or season of them just in the good place trying to fix the problems there, because probably would have again been flogging the show for longer than they should have.
I think as you get towards the ending, there's usually a natural inclination to sort of speed up a bit and gather momentum, and I think that episode worked sort of on that level, and it also sets up the finale, which obviously was very sad. And I watched that on over breakfast one morning before heading out to a comic convention, because I didn't want to head off for the weekend having not seen it and have it spoiled for me by someone wandering past at the convention. It did send me off for the day on a bit of a weird energy because I was just crying the whole time.
Yeah, it was really quite touching ending, and it's not, I guess, because it ends with death. I mean, it's a show about death, really, isn't it? And it's weirdly a show when death is not the end. The first scene is a character has just died, kind of moving on to what's next, and they managed to resolve the tension of how is this going to end with we'll bring death to the afterlife, which is an interesting way out of it. But it is obviously very sad to see these characters who you've spent so much time with and really got to know, and they are very richly developed characters. We've met most of them, we've had their parents introduced to them as well, and their lives on Earth before they died, for at least for the core cast of 4. And then it is obviously very sad to see them go at the end. The ending sort of mostly, weirdly, the show reminded me the most in a sort of similar but different way is very much the ending of 6 Feet Under, which ended with the death of each character, and each character got their moment at the end when you see how their life expanded and also their life was summed up in how they died. And I was surprised again with both 6 Feet Under and with The Good Place, the degree to which it is actually very emotionally touching when you see this character you've come to know and love finally depart.
Yeah, someone on my Twitter stream made the snarky remark that it was strange that The Good Place is effectively made a finale where you just spend a whole hour watching the 4 main characters decide to kill themselves. A snarky missing of the point, but it's definitely a bit of an emotional flogging as you watch them all make these decisions.
Yeah, but it's got, I guess one of the points it makes is that, without life has no meaning unless it comes to an end. That's the way of it. I mean, I did like the fact that they kind of, this is a show very much about philosophy. I mean, one of the main characters is a moral philosopher, and his job is to teach the others, especially the main character, Eleanor, about moral philosophy. And for a show that is so much about philosophy and ideas, it keeps it very accessible. But they kept it right through to the end. Even in the last episode when Chidi's explaining to Eleanor about Far Eastern philosophical ideas about life and spirituality and what happens after death. And they've kind of kept that real philosophical intellectual edge to it all the way throughout, but always in an accessible and interesting way, which I think is really quite an accomplishment.
Yeah. I have a philosophy degree, and every so often during this show I got to vaguely think, oh yeah, I was once taught that, when Chidi explains some theory or the life of Plato and Aristotle or something to Eleanor. Something sparks the back of my mind, and I just thought, I once knew that. Which is just another philosophical moment about the transience of life and knowledge, really.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was quite impressed, to be honest. Well, is impressed the right word? It was surprising to me that they actually managed to propose this storyline where they were gonna, change the way the afterlife worked, and they actually had a solution handy. I don't know, I mean, maybe this is, again, cynicism, but I was a bit sort of, okay, are they going to leave themselves at this place where they need to have a better idea, and then the better idea is going to be left mysterious, or they're going to change it in a way that we never truly understand? But actually having and explaining a new system was a level of complexity and tackling the problems that I, for some reason, didn't fully expect them to get to. I thought, it's okay, to go into, relatively full spoilers, in the final episode, as Alistair said, they decide to end their existences once they've reached a level of contentment in the afterlife by just walking through this door. And you never see what's on the other side of that door. There's no attempt to visualise what happens when they walk through this door. They just disappear. And I honestly thought it might end up being kind of like that for the whole show. The whole new afterlife might just end up being some kind of glowing transcendent space that they just walk into. And they wouldn't attempt to, wrestle with what they've replaced the existing system with, which would potentially have been a bit of a cheap moment at the end of it all. So yeah, I was very happy that they actually did manage to more or less pull that off, or at least present what is at least a viable, interesting idea about what an alternative would be.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. They could have come up with something woolly, which is like, oh, it just should be based on love or something like that. There's a way they could have like come up with some kind of big, broad emotional strokes. I guess similar to what they didn't go is for a sort of, I guess, like Doctor Who-esque sort of ending when it's usually like, the power of thought or the power of love is what saves the day. Like something that maybe works in broad emotional strokes, but the more you think about it, the less sense it makes. Whereas this, they actually came up with something when you think about it, it does sort of make sense. I mean, it's probably rooted in some ideas of philosophy that the show has been playing with from the beginning.
Sorry, I've forgotten most of the philosophy degree. I can't tell you which philosopher they borrowed that from.
Ah, fair enough. But yeah, but I think to move on from the philosophy, the show is always very funny when something explodes for no reason or falls out of the sky. They kept up the comedy, like very well written in terms of like the density of jokes is really up there. Like it's getting close to sort of like Simpsons level of really like packing in a joke to like every line or at least like every kind of skit. And there's just so many funny sequences, such as I did enjoy a bit in the fourth season when Chidi's had his memory erased at one point and Jason's confided in him that he's not a monk, and Chidi's trying to teach Jason moral philosophy, which is obviously hilarious. And there's a various bit when Jason, like, they have a wish machine or something, he wishes for a motorcycle that then explodes later, and he's got his bones like, why does everything I love explode, or something, or some line like that. For a show that is, like I say, about profound things like moral philosophy, the afterlife, death, there's also a fair amount of like people doing stupid things and getting blown up.
Yeah, there's a nice sort of surreal sense of humour along the lines of, well, we're in the afterlife where you will do things like, oh, I wish for a bubblegum unicorn, and then a bubblegum unicorn would appear, or a talking bear would appear. And, sometimes they actually visualise these things. Sometimes they're just kind of left off screen because, TV budget. But either way, it's funny that they went all the way into that sort of weird abstract stuff. Because they were actually, as I say, dealing with some relatively dense philosophical ideas about, moral relativism, which I think is, having had 2 minutes to think about it, the main idea they're sort of embracing here. Obviously, absolute morality, as in going, someone is either good or bad, is obviously bullshit, especially with the issue that they stumbled upon in the third season, which is that there's no ethical consumption under capitalism, You can't ethically do basically anything on Earth because you will in some way be propping up something which kills people, or is in some way bad. And yeah, going from that to this idea of, ethics being based on personal development and it being different for every individual person, and you just sort of doing the best you can under the circumstances. It is, in its way, quite complicated, and there are a lot of scenes in this show which are just resort to, and now Chidi will literally explain the philosophy using a blackboard.
Yeah, and it's entertaining.
And the fact that they fit in, as you say, a lot of density of jokes is one of the reasons why they've managed to get, 4 seasons of sitcoms with this much philosophical explanation in it.
Yeah, and also because obviously they'll offset very well with like, sort of Chi trying to make a point about Enlightenment, moral philosophy, or ancient Greece or something like that, and then it'll be offset by Eleanor making a comment about, I don't know, like trying to steal shrimp from Red Lobster or something like that. Something that's very, very base. Or Jason, I don't know, makes some joke about his life of petty crime and street dancing.
Well, yeah, the joke is, all these characters were in some way bad people on Earth, and there's normally, most moments can be punctured with a line about how awful they were, or how annoying or indecisive or selfish they were.
Or how bad the world is. They grew up, I mean, like Eleanor grew up without much love in her life, and Jason obviously grew up in like quite extreme poverty, at least extreme poverty for the United States, and deprivation. Even quite a lot of humour is made up about how the fact that his school was like an abandoned boat or something like that, which is funny in its own right, but also I guess makes a broader point, which is we're not just responsible ourselves, we're the products of the society that produced us, and that should be taken into account to some degree.
Yeah, there's another reason why, absolute this person good, this person bad doesn't really work as a system.
Yeah.
This whole show basically is one long angry knife assault at the traditional concept of heaven and hell. Basically going for this whole idea of good people go heaven, bad people go hell is just at best stupid and at worst actively shitty and judgmental, and this show has basically made 4 seasons about how stupid it is. Yeah. By just setting up this archetypal version of it and then having these characters drift along in it, sort of looking at everything and going, hang on, that's stupid as well. And yeah, it's been 4 seasons and they've made their point.
Yeah. One thing I do want to say is that, I mean, the core cast is great. If I had to choose a favourite, I would say, although I really liked the Eleanor and Chidi relationship and, really how they grow as people is really well, over the 4 series, really plotted out. Although probably my favourite character is Jason, who's just so funny and so many great one-liners. And I think part of what makes the Jason character so great is how Manny Jacinto plays the part, the energy that he brings to the character. You got a real sense of like comedic timing, physical comedy. He's very, very good in the part. But also kind of he brings this sort of like real warmth and like humanity to the character. Who's got this childlike view of the world almost, even though he's someone who, again, commits crime and stuff like that. He kind of sees the best in people and has a very sort of like almost innocent view of the world despite the poverty and degradation that he grew up in. And he just, I don't know, really worked as a great comedy character. And like usually you find that he would get the best line in an episode or the best joke. And at the end when he spends a few years wandering around the forest, thinking, reflecting before he finally goes through the gate. And then there's a bit when he goes like, oh, you did become a monk at the end. Yeah, it was just a kind of really sweet little sort of epitaph to the character.
Yeah, I think a lot of the more serious, more three-dimensional characters, which is basically everyone except Jason, did end up reaching a certain degree of transcending themselves and becoming better people by the start of season 4. It was very well written and it was very touching and you do feel very fond of them all, but it did mean they were less funny.
Yeah.
Like all the good Eleanor jokes are in the first season or two.
Yeah.
That's harsh, but all the really, really great Eleanor jokes are in the first season or two.
Yeah, very much about, her trying to do something quite base when she should be in heaven, kind of enjoying the sort of cerebral serenity of it all.
Yeah.
There's definitely a thing about the character, because the main point of the character is he needs to learn to think and not being impulsive. And there's definitely some episodes I think around sort of in Series 3 and Series 4, when Jason saves the day by he actually stops and thinks and does something intelligent, and thus showing he's learned and grown as a character. For example, there's the one when they're in the bad place, and he manages to pass a coded message to Janet they're trying to save by saying she's a girl, when she's always says like not a girl, but by actually using that as like a code, it goes to show that he's like sort of stopped and thought for a minute and thus grown as a character.
It's true, when that bit happened I actually got it at roughly the same time. I noticed that Jason said girl and she did not say not a girl, and I was briefly proud of myself for about 20 seconds before realising, oh hang on, this just means you're as intelligent as Jason Mendoza. Well done mate. That philosophy degree went to good use.
Fair enough. Well, at least now you know not to blow up a motorcycle.
Yeah, at least I had this realisation before I went on Twitter and boasted about it.
Yeah,
this show is showrun by Michael Schur, who's also been involved in, to various degrees, The Office, Parks and Rec, and Brooklyn Nine-Nine. All of which, by the way, are good shows, which you should probably watch. Especially if you like this show, you'll probably enjoy the sort of vaguely similar tone of humour and self-improvement and characters who you like. And yeah, a lot of them have this sort of vague tone of the characters transcending their faults and becoming amazing wonder people as the show goes along, which is very nice to watch. It does make you feel very much like you've watched them grow, but does mean that they are less funny by the end because the faults are what makes them funny. Like, yeah, Parks and Rec by the end is very much about how emotional you feel about the characters and how lovely everyone is, rather than jokes by the last season or two.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, The Good Place, I think, is very similar in that regard, which is why it's probably good that it ended when it did, in that it's great that the characters have grown and you've gone on this journey with them, which makes you really feel emotionally invested in them. Other than like some shows, I guess, which just, the characters don't change so they can keep the humour sort of alive. But obviously, inevitably, therefore, if you're going to put characters into motion and have them learn and grow, there will come a point when the story must end, and I think they timed it well for The Good Place.
Well, yeah, plus The Good Place is more plot-driven than those other shows I mentioned. Like, a lot more plot-driven. It's not just a sitcom about some characters doing something stupid in a situation.
Yeah.
So, the fact that they had the plot to drive them through the final season, even though the characters might have kind of come towards the end of their evolution, is what I think stopped that being quite as much of a dead stop, and is, another reason why I think it's probably good to end when they did.
Yeah, the plot of The Good Place is not just about character growth and development, which some shows obviously do. The kind of the conflicts are very much conflicts of the week, and the long-term plot is the growth and relationships between the characters. And that's also more common in sitcoms than in drama shows, where drama shows base itself much more heavily around some kind of traumatic tension to be resolved. I also thought Ted Danson was excellent, considering he belongs to like a sort of older generation of actors. That fact that he sort of maybe reinvented himself a bit for this part, or certainly introduced himself to a newer, younger audience. I mean, I can't remember the last time I saw a Ted Danson thing that I really, really liked.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the last Ted Danson thing I actually saw at all is, to be honest. I'm sure I've watched a film with him in at some stage. But yeah, I thought he was great in this. This was, for me, aged 36, this is why, well, younger than 36 at the time, as I turned 36 after this show ended. This was definitely when I discovered Ted Danson.
Yeah, was he in Galaxy Quest?
Probably did watch that, but I don't remember coming away from it thinking, oh my god, Ted Danson. If anything, I came away from it thinking, oh my god, Alan Rickman.
Yeah, Alan Rickman obviously is the best star of that. Actually, sorry, that's Tim Allen.
Oh, okay. That would explain why I didn't discover him there.
Yeah, it's good that with these kind of like, Ted Danson's been in like sort of like epic sitcoms, like Cheers and things like that, which is, a fundamental cornerstone of like kind of the history of the American sitcom. It's good to see that, now he's on, Netflix and stuff he's still finding relevant comedic work and is still being excellent, which, goes to show that like, yeah, he is a very talented comedian, and I thought he did great in the role of Michael. I really liked how like right at the end he gets the thing he always wanted, which is a frequent Flyers club card, which is it's just a really sweet little moment of pathos to the character.
Yeah, and I liked Michael. Michael had a sort of slightly different journey to the humans, but yeah, a different and more complicated and interesting one, which was, I think in some ways they didn't go into it in a huge amount of detail because the humans were kind of the main character, but I liked seeing his sort of slow evolution off to the side.
Yeah.
But yeah, Ted Danson is so charismatic that he can come in and play these huge beats about how he's evolved since we last saw him, and it still works.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, no, this was a great show. I'm sad it's over, even as I'm okay with it ending when it did.
Yeah, I really liked the ending, especially the last episode. Really good finale. Each character got their own little moment and their own little send-off, and they even revisited all like the minor characters, like Mindy and things like that, and the various demons and the other humans, they met like on the season when they're on Earth and things like that. The fact that everyone got their little moment at the end and everything wrapped up quite nicely, I thought was a really nice way to end it.
Okay, and second up, we are going to be talking about The Platform, a movie available on Netflix. I believe it's a Netflix original movie, so I think it is on Netflix in most territories. Worldwide streaming, according to Wikipedia. This is directed by Galder Gazzello Urrutia, and, well, it's a bit of a sort of high-concept sci-fi thriller with a bit of horror involved, about a huge vertical structure. It could be a tower or a pit, it's never really clarified, with two people living at each numbered level, and they are fed via a platform of food that comes down the middle of the tower and starts at the top fully stocked, and then each level the two people living there take what they can, and then it goes down another level, and as you imagine there's not much left by the time it gets towards the bottom. That's, there are like literally hundreds of levels in this tower. By about level 100, that's about when the killings and cannibalism starts. So yeah, it's that sort of movie. And also, I don't know if you picked it up from my description, but there might be some level of allegory in this film. just maybe. So yeah, anyway, Alistair, what did you think of this film/metaphor for our sad lives?
So this film, it's quite interesting, it's quite odd. I mean, I guess similar to The Good Place, it's sort of quite chin-scratchingly interesting, like, sort of film. But
he said his face.
Yeah, but see, for a film that is, again, a sort of chin-scratchy film, it is actually very tense and also quite gory and things like that. So I did quite like it because, for a film that's, like one giant extended metaphor, it managed to locate that metaphor in a setup that's got quite a lot of tension and some quite nasty bits in it, which for me works quite well.
I don't know if enjoyed this film would be a good word. I don't know if you've noticed from the way the things we've ended up selecting for this podcast, but I don't tend to watch that much in the way of genuinely nasty horror films or films where people just tear each other to bits and then eat each other. It's not really my genre. So I did watch this film with a bit of a constant desire to run for cover. But nonetheless, it is a slightly simplistic but quite well done allegory. I think it possibly got into a bit of a wheel spinning section in the middle. Like, there's a very good bit in the first half hour, there's a very good bit in the last half hour, and then there's a big chunk in the middle where they just kind of spin their wheels a little bit. But yeah, the stuff that's good is very good. And the relationship between the two characters who are together at the start, like, I think one bit I missed in my explanation of the premise is that they move them around between levels once a month. So you could go from being at level 6, they're numbered from the top down. So level 6 gets like good access to the food, to level 178, where obviously it's basically cannibalism time overnight. So the two characters who are together at the start and end up moving to at least one more level, I'll say, together, they have quite a nice relationship, and I was sorry when that relationship ended.
Yeah.
But yeah, I enjoyed it. I felt like it was one of these films which has a sort of simplistic premise/allegory, and I don't know if it ever really moved beyond it. Like The Good Place, you may note I praised The Good Place for actually having a conclusion to their allegory, actually saying something at the end.
Yeah.
Not to get into extreme spoilers, but unavoidably this is a spoiler, so in at least a broad sense, I don't feel this film really says a huge amount at the end. Like, you can probably get the message of the film from what I've already said about it. You know, that stuff is very unfairly distributed between the people at the top and the people at the bottom, in that the people at the top just take it all.
Yeah.
There you go. You've now received the message of the platform. Obviously, if you want to see a fun action allegory film where people tear each other to pieces, you can still watch it. You'll probably still get something out of it, but I don't know if you're going to get that much more about how we can fix society out of it.
No, exactly. You know, I thought that it worked quite well being a film that is like one big metaphor. But, you know, you could either have it as metaphor for society or for the environment or something like that, which is, that, we need to only take what we need or things like that to sort of survive or to, well, not necessarily to survive, but take what we need just to get by, rather than just like, if some people hoard as much as they can, and this creates obviously inequalities that has problems further down the system. There's various points in the film when characters try to come up with a more equal way to distribute the food, like someone's trying to negotiate with the people below saying, look, just take one small portion of food each and there'll be enough food for everyone, and the people below are very much like, no, fuck you. It's even said at some point, someone says to one of the characters, like, are you a socialist? It's even almost said like, in a sort of derogatory way, like, yeah, that's never going to work. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, this is a film that straight up wears its metaphor on its sleeve. But, as a film that had, again, like, it's a film that has something to say, but has an engaging way to say it. Like, the whole film is about this one metaphor, this one construct, this one idea. And it plays into every aspect of the film, but the film is still tense and engaging. It didn't feel like a lecture. Although it was unsubtle, I didn't feel necessarily I was being bashed over the head with what I was trying to say. But, yeah, for a film that's so much about an idea, it was sort of had a lot of tension and was very engaging.
Yeah, the tension and the action was good. I ended up wishing there was kind of more to the main character, who is called Goreng, I think, and is played by Ivan Masag. And I kept waiting for some reveal about his motivation or his past that would make him seem more nuanced or more three-dimensional. But, again, sorry, spoilers, I guess. He is kind of just a bland every dude. Yeah,
it's one of the flaws of the film is that it is light on characterization and light on background. Like, you don't really discover why the whole, as the whole structure seems to be called, has been built or for what purpose. It seems to be the combination of both a prison and like a wish machine. Some of the people are in there because they've committed crimes and are serving time, which makes sense. Though some of the people are in there because it seems to be you go in there and you get something when you come out. So he says he wants a diploma. Those never really specified for or for what. I guess to better his chances on the outside, he's going to survive this horrible kind of struggle to survive. So if he makes it through to the end, then he gets what he wants at the end. But the person he's in with at the beginning, it sort of said that he's a criminal and he's in there because he's committed a crime. So it's just all about this one metaphor. It doesn't really go into why the people are there, what's motivating them, what's outside, why this thing was built. It's almost like a magical realist film in that, like, this is the universe. There isn't really life outside it.
I mean, I'd be kind of happy to take the massive whole tower thing as just something that exists. I just felt like I wanted a bit more insight into the characters, especially the main character.
Yeah, you're right. He is very much sort of a bit of an everyman in that he's just like a good guy. He's got some principles and some morals. He's not bang up for killing and eating people, but obviously, I guess they're trying to say something like, he's like most people would be. He has, he thinks killing and eating people is bad and doesn't want to do it, but it's the system that he's in eventually forces him to do that to survive, because at the end he'd rather live than die, and he'd sacrifice his morality to do that. Again, it's the fact that everything's just weaved into this one metaphor, but I guess he has to be a sort of bland everyman to stand in for everyone, I suppose.
Yeah, it's a film that very much does its one thing reasonably well. I mean, it's only about an hour and a half long, so it's not gonna bore you too much as it rolls through its single metaphor.
It felt even, I think, faster than an hour and a half. When it finished, I was almost surprised. I mean, we'll talk about the ending a bit, but I always felt that that did not feel like an hour and a half. So I think it is well put together and quite tense. And I thought it's got a really good. What I really liked about it's got this sort of sense of escalating tension. Although ironically, the tension escalates as the characters move downward. But like it starts with them on level 43, and when the food arrives on level 43, at first the main character's like, that's just scraps and leftovers, and his cellmate is just kind of happily tucking in to like licking bits off discarded chicken bones and things like that, and and like eating salad that other people have stuck their hands in, and the main character's like, oh, it's disgusting, and he's like, this is all right, 43 is not bad, there's food here, even occasionally a little bit of wine and stuff, and then he's like eating the food and then like sort of spitting on the food before it goes down, and you get the sense of like, this is pretty unpleasant. And then after that he wakes up on level 172, is it? Or it was like 178,
something like that.
And then there's this moment of like, oh, okay, now there's a real sense of the tension steps up then you suddenly realise, oh God, what's going to happen? And then, when the food tray arrives, like the food's been completely licked clean. All the plates almost look like sparkling. There's nothing on any of them. And then, there's a sense of, okay, so there's two people now. What are they going to do? And then, then there's a sort of, it's quite well structured. I mean, I'm moving to spoilery bit, so do skip ahead if you don't want to find out what happens. But then there's like a respite in the tension when he ends up on level like 32 or something like that. So he's like, again, and he's sort of enjoying the food. And then when they've got some abundance, there's almost like they attempt to communicate with the people below them, being like, no, ration this, spread it out, help the people down. But it doesn't work, partly because they want to eat now they've got food. And then he gets sent to level 202. And, and it continues like that. It goes around that cycle a few times. But each time he gets sent down the structure, there's a real sense of like, God, and he goes lower each time he goes down. It's like, this is bad. And bad things happen down here. And that sense of escalating tension throughout the film really works, I thought.
Yeah, it does keep moving forward neatly enough, and he meets different people. There's a bit where he's in a cell with one of the people who works or used to work as the administrator on this terrifying machine.
Yeah.
And his conversations with her are quite interesting.
Yeah.
It's a nicely executed sort of stroll through this metaphor.
Yeah.
Did you say you wanted to go full spoilers on the actual ending?
Yeah. Just before we do, one of the other aspects about the metaphor is that, as well as being the metaphor of like, the vertical society and how people at different levels like look down on them, like it really reminded me of High Rise by J.G. Ballard, both the book and the film. In that sense, there's another great metaphor I think it did quite well, which is kind of digs into the prisoner's dilemma a bit, which is when you're trapped in a room with someone, what is there to be gained by betraying them or not betraying them? I mean, this, like, by betraying them, was like killing them and eating them. And it does have some quite interesting to say about the psychology of, is it better to work with the other person, or is it better just to like betray them at the first opportunity so that you can get some food? And so there's that element of, like, again, two people trapped in a prison cell. Do they cooperate? Do they betray each other? Which it digs into quite well as well. So it's like it's got a metaphor on each level as well as the vertical metaphor.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to spoil this horror film now.
So if you're intrigued by it, and I would recommend this film. It's an interesting thing to watch, and it's I haven't seen a huge number of Spanish films, and especially Spanish Netflix films, so I'd recommend watching it. So if you're intrigued by this, maybe skip this bit and then go and see for yourself and see how it ends.
Yeah, don't worry, this is basically the end of the podcast. After this, we're just going to sign off.
Yeah.
But the ending, leaving a bit of actual spoiler space, I suppose. Yeah, they reach the actual bottom, which is level 333, which was around when I thought, oh, hang on, that's half of 666. Are we headed for literal there in afterlife, this is hell?
Yeah.
Which I'm assuming is a deliberate trick they were running on me. Or maybe there's a possibility that is still what they're hinting at.
Yeah, I'm sure the significance of 333 is probably the significance you've hit on, yeah. I mean, because I guess to make that tower 666 stories, I think we'd just stretch it out beyond the bounds of credibility, I suppose.
But yeah, and then they descend into blank space and meet a dead bloke.
Yeah.
And then this child he's found goes back up into the tower without him.
Yeah, because there's a whole bit when they're trying to, at the end, when basically they try to force people to cooperate by breaking up their beds, using iron bars as weapons, standing on the food platform, and then going down each level, and then distributing the food and beating up people, and with a lot of beating up people.
Yeah, there's a lot of benevolent murder in this sequence. They're killing them for their own good.
Yeah, or at least hurting them really badly. And I know, again, maybe the film's trying to say something about that, like, lots of people with good intentions in the world try to implement these fairer systems, but they actually just result in there being a lot of violence because, I don't necessarily agree with that, but until they're trying to say something like, can human nature only be constrained by violence? Or things
There's
like
definitely
that.
a bleak version of human nature in this film,
Yeah.
By the time someone's literally shat into someone's face, you start to think, I'm not sure I think they've sort of concluded that the main problem with distributing stuff fairly in society is that people are just arseholes.
Yeah, like such as, literally a bit when someone shits on someone level below them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I guess they hit on this idea that they want to send a message to the top by preserving a panna cotta, which is quite interesting and sort of profound, but also quite silly on some level. And I did find myself, unfortunately, laughing at lines like, protect the panna cotta.
The panna cotta is the message, Alistair.
Yeah, the panna cotta is the message. Yeah, that was... I don't know if that was intentionally funny. I mean, it's got to be. It was quite silly.
But obviously this is a film about, allegory to such a naked degree that I guess you've got to let that sort of thing go. But yeah, that was about what I thought. Is it the message, though? Are you sure they're going to look at it and think, my God, the resilience of humanity, and not just think, oh, that's weird, and then throw it in the bin?
I mean, yeah, I suppose. You never really find out what the authority on level 0 is, other than there's a large kitchen up there that makes the beautiful food. Yeah, and then when they reach the bottom, they save a child and then send the child back up. So I don't know. Yeah, it's an interesting ending. I'm not exactly sure.
I must admit, I did think, well, this is the ending of a film that hasn't actually got an ending.
Yeah.
This is basically, I mean, maybe I should have saved that point for this segment. This is the part that made me come away thinking, well, you haven't actually got a resolution to your allegory, have you?
Yeah.
You've got society's unfair, people are cunts. What shall we do about it? Shrug, fart noise.
That's the sort of thing, yeah. There's no sort of lesson to learn. Or, yeah, which is people try to enforce, a slightly fairer system and it's just resulted in a lot of violence. Or there is just plainly not enough to go around for 333 levels of people. Yeah, which is, I just realised there's 2 people in each level, so there's 666 people.
Boom.
Yeah, that's what they did there. See, yeah.
Nice. Okay, well, we cracked it. I mean, to be clear, this does not make the allegory, or at least the ending, any better, but,
Yeah, it is a classic kind of, again, going back to what I said about Good Place, like, it's a sort of Doctor Who sort of ending, which is you've got quite a clever story and quite a clever metaphor, and it's all worked out quite well, but you clearly paint yourself into a corner where there's no way out of it. So they just sort of have rather than Doctor Who do a kind of magic, everything's better, what they do is art house film non-ending.
It is, exactly. It's an art house film non-ending. I don't know, maybe it's meant to be one of these sort of finding grace in horror moments, but it just came across as somewhere between pretentious and silly to me. Sorry, film.
It is classic, art house film non-ending in that it ends so suddenly and you think like, oh, I didn't realise that was the end. And then you think about what was the ending? Maybe someone learned something. Maybe, I'm not really sure. Is it the ending just to say it's all futile and it just goes on forever? I mean, yeah, it is very much, other than the absence of Philip Glass, it is very much an art house film non-ending.
Yeah, I don't really have much else to say about it. The allegory's fine, the film's fine. If you like raw violence and cannibalism, there's definitely some of that.
Yeah.
It's a fun, grindy film. Doesn't really have an ending. What's you going to do?
Hopefully it'll find an audience on Netflix. Well, it was the 3rd most watched thing on Netflix, I think, when I watched it, so I don't know. But yeah, it was interesting. It's definitely, it's a good film to podcast about.
Yeah, it was an interesting thing to watch. It is, as I sort of implied earlier, not the sort of thing I would normally voluntarily watch, so I'm glad I've experienced it.
That's all we have time for. If you've enjoyed this episode of Moderate Fantasy Violence, then please subscribe in your podcatcher of choice. And while you're there, leave us a review, as it helps other people find out about the show. If you want more from us, then you can visit our website, moderatefantasyviolence.com, where you can listen to other episodes of the podcast and read things we've written. If you head over there now, you'll see an article I wrote about how Doctor Who depicts the future.
And if you want still more from us, you can follow us on Twitter as @MFV Podcast or Facebook by searching Moderate Fantasy Violence, where you can see the latest news on articles Alistair's published or when exactly the podcast is coming out, although, God willing, we seem to be back on something resembling a schedule now, so that'll probably be a little less in question. Okay, and thanks for listening. I've been Nick Bryan. You can find me on the internet at nickbryan.com, or you can hear more moment-to-moment updates on how I'm coping with self-isolation at @nickmb on Twitter.
I've been Alistair Ball. You can get more of me on Twitter, where I'm at AlistairJRBall, and you can find more of my writing at redtrainblog.com. Thanks for listening. In our next episode, we'll be reviewing Castlevania, created by Warren Ellis, and Netflix viral sensation Tiger King. See you then. Goodbye.
Bye. This has been Moderate Fantasy Violence, the podcast. I'm Nicholas Matthew Bryan. Thank you for listening. Go do something good. And please come back next episode, we need you.